My own sister, in vintage dyer, and with a smile like shattered glass, stood before our 200 closest friends, family, and my entire professional world, and gently tapped her manicured nail against her champagne glass. That soft ting sound silenced the beautiful hum of my wedding celebration. I remember how beautiful she looked, and how proud our mother would have been to see the two of us together, in this grand Manhattan ballroom, overlooking the park. I was wrong. A toast to the groom, Elara began, her voice laced with poison. To my sweet pitiable little sister, always chasing but never quite catching. First it was mother's love which she poured onto me, then it was my hand, me down clothes my cast-off friends. And now it's this man. Her eyes slid over to my new husband, Alexander. A nervous titter played through the crowd, and my stomach turned to ice. Elara said. She was so desperate for a fairy tale that she forgot to ask the right questions. Like where our mother's generous trust, meant for both of us, actually went. I had to protect it from her naive, trusting hands. In fact, this lovely party is funded by it. The room became a tomb. I looked at Alexander. But he was only watching Elara with an unreadable, almost appreciative gleam in his eye. And in that moment I knew. True retribution would now begin. The following months were a silent, glacial hemorrhage. Elara's cruelty wasn't a bomb, it was a slowly administered poison. She sent monthly statements, which were a permanent ledger of my debt. They weren't just numbers. The notes on her letters were psychological torment. Another 200,000 for the interest on your art school loans. One letter read. I thought mother paid for that, but it was me, really. Your art is a charity case for me. Each invoice reinforced my helplessness, the feeling of being indebted to my own sister for my own dreams. Alexander was a quiet island. He never raised his voice, never got angry. One night when I was crying over Elara's latest invoice, he sat beside me and took my hand. His hands were large, firm, hardened from engineering projects, but they were incredibly gentle. He said, the law is a slow beast, Elise. Emotion is its fuel, but evidence is its teeth. We need evidence to beat Elara at her own game. He suggested I start recording my conversations with her, using a powerful audio pen he had. It felt like a secret weapon. I am a painter, an artist who understands color and canvas. On this new battlefield, words were my color, and truth was my canvas. I used it during our obligatory lunches. Elara would always invite me to expensive restaurants, where she would pay the bill, only to add it to my ledger later. I recorded when she told me how she had protected me from bad investments, and how mother had only entrusted the burden of financial acumen to her. Elara would say, you have your art, Elise. Let me handle the real world. Mother knew you couldn't carry the weight of this money. She gave you her love, but she gave me the responsibility. Each of her words was like a knife twisting in my heart, but I kept a placid smile on my face. I kept wearing my pitiable mask. But the real revelation didn't come from her. It came from the silence around her words. One evening, she had me over for dinner at her Tribeca penthouse. Everything there was clean, white and lifeless, as if no one truly lived there. I left the pen tucked inside my shawl, which I draped over an armchair. After my departure, the pen recorded for 2 hours. It captured the name of a man named Vincent Kraft. Elara was on the phone. The Davenport legacy is almost fully absorbed. The sister is inert, emotionally devastated, financially dependent. A non-factor. She won't do anything. We can push through until August. And then find a business reason to shut her out. My inheritance wasn't just stolen. It was a laundering machine. Elara was using my money to clean a criminal's illicit transactions. And by painting me as a clueless girl, she had made me a part of that machine. I took the recording to Alexander. We sat in the office of our new apartment, where he worked on his bridge designs. He put on headphones and listened, his face turning to stone. When he was done, he slowly removed the headphones and looked at me. There was no anger in his eyes, but a deep, cold stillness. He said, this isn't about stolen money anymore, Elise. This is about survival. If Kraft is involved, you are a loose end. He might do anything to make you disappear. He proposed a planned infiltration. We wouldn't confront her directly, we would trap her with her own words. I would use my assigned pitifulness as the ultimate weapon. He demonstrated a skill for counter, surveillance, digital footprinting, and mirroring phone data. He showed me how a simple audio file could be securely stored in an online Dropbox, accessible only by the two of us with a code. I didn't question it in that moment, I only needed his hardened edge. I was astonished that my husband knew so much about clandestine warfare. But this wasn't the time for questions. My trust in him was absolute. I acted the perfect prey. I called Alara and told her I couldn't take the debt anymore. That I wanted to sell my paintings or do something. I recorded everything. Conversations in a rain-slicked parking garage. Her argument with an anxious-looking man outside an abandoned warehouse in Red Hook. I took pictures from a distance, using my phone's camera to capture Alara exchanging something with a frightened-looking man. Alexander pieced together a mosaic. He found out Vincent Kraft fronted a construction company, notorious for laundering money through shell companies. Alara wasn't just Kraft's banker. She was the funnel for cleaning money from human and drug trafficking. She would target sisters like me, open their personal bank accounts, commingle them with Kraft's criminal proceeds, and then wire the money to offshore accounts. I wasn't just a pawn, I was a secure channel. The culmination came with a silent, shared look, using a digital key Alexander had created. We planted a mirror copy of all the audio files onto the sealed server on Alara's firm's network. He'd found a small vulnerability in their system architecture and created a backdoor. He said, "She thinks of herself as a digital queen, but she hasn't locked all her doors." The masterstroke was the final recording. I requested a mediation with Alara. I wore a wire. I baited her with my spoken despair. She embraced the temptation with glee. She thought she had finally reached the moment of breaking my spirit. Sitting by the large glass windows of her penthouse, holding a glass of wine, a triumphant light in her eyes, she confessed. "Kraft doesn't like loose ends, Elise. You are a liability I might have to resolve very soon. You ask too many questions, you doubt. He doesn't like that." Then she laid out everything about multi-million-dollar transfers from a shell company called Davenport Renewal to the Bahamas, which she had set up in my name. She talked about how the money from Mother's Trust was almost depleted, and when it was gone, Kraft had a plan for a non-profit organization that shuts down with all liabilities. Her confession was a masterpiece of arrogant self-destruction. She thought she had won, because she thought of me as a harmless girl who could do nothing. The recording ended. I stood up and, for the first time, let all my masks fall away. There was only cold, ruthless certainty in my eyes. I turned to look at her, my body no longer trembling, my voice no longer shaking. "What?" she hissed, her smile suddenly faltering. I smiled, but there was no joy in that smile, only a cold victory. "Check your secure server, Alara. The one labeled Legacy Project. The one you thought was storing our family memories." She opened her laptop, her fingers skittering nervously over the keyboard. She saw all the copied files and her breath caught. Her face went white, her eyes wide. The silence was absolute, broken only by the roar of New York outside. She looked at me, her eyes filled with shock, fear, and a deep sense of betrayal. I said nothing. I simply picked up my bag and walked out, the sound of her ragged breath following me. We went to the FBI, with Alexander presenting a digital dossier as my calm, methodical representative. He didn't just provide the audio files, he gave a complete timeline, financial breadcrumbs, and a digital footprint that clearly mapped the connection between Alara and Vincent Kraft. He presented it so professionally the agents didn't hesitate to follow up. Alara's arrest was a media feast. Her photo in vintage Dayer with handcuffs was on every news channel. Vincent Kraft's empire crumbled, as Alara's confession opened doors to many other connections and transactions. The trust money was frozen, and what was left eventually came back under my control. But by then, it didn't seem to matter as much. I stood on the balcony of our new apartment with Alexander, the view stretching toward the Hudson River. My revenge was not a moment of violent catharsis, but the silent, final sound of a jail door closing. There was no joy, only a deep exhaustion. As if I had been carrying a heavy weight for a year, and had finally set it down to rest. I was never pitiable. I was patient. I learned that true power lies not in rage, but in stillness, when you wait for your enemy to trap themselves in their own weakness. I asked him, Alexander, the skills you have, no bridge engineer learns that. No engineer understands digital trails like that, uses audio pens like that. He was silent for a while, watching the lights of the boats on the river. Finally, he said, before I built bridges, I built traps for a government agency. I left that life because I thought I wanted to build the world, not dismantle it. But the day Ilara called you pitiable, I saw a mission. To protect you and get justice for you. My old skills came back for a new purpose. He wasn't just my husband. He was my fortress, my silent collaborator. He taught me that revenge is sweetest when it is administered cleanly, when it leaves no room for doubt. My revenge was ours. And it was complete. A few months later, I stood in my studio, before a blank canvas. It wasn't blank anymore, it was full of possibility. I picked up my brush and made the first stroke. It wasn't black or blue or gray. It was gold. Mother never told me I was pitiable. She never told me I was weak. She only ever said, Elise, your vision is different. You see the world as it should be. Now I understood. The world is not always just, but the courage to fight for justice resides within us. True revenge is not about forgiveness or forgetting. It is about establishing your worth as a person and making sure those who hurt you cannot write the final chapter of your story. Patience, wisdom, and truth are the greatest revenge. And this victory, this peace, this new beginning, is the fruit of that truth. I kept painting every line, every color a part of my new story. And this story would be written by me, by no one else.